The French Revolution started in 1789, when the peasants could barely sustain themselves and their family. To make matters worse, they still had to pay taxes that the government established. The poor were getting poorer. To understand why the government was taxing the peasants so much, we need to back up. The French economy was deteriorating more and more, to the point that they were going broke. The reason why they were so broke was because of events like the American Revolution. So the government had the idea to make more taxes so they could regain their money. The nobles and the churches didn't have to pay these taxes. The people were struck with Enlightenment ideas like equality, liberty, and brotherhood. These Enlightenment ideas make the peasants think they needed a change. The government could not be taking advantage of them. Liberty, equality, and fraternity became the slogan of the French Revolution. They wanted a government by the people, for the people. Famous philosophers or enlightened thinkers of the French Revolution were people like John Locke, who established the idea that all of the people were equally important. No matter if you were a noble or a peasant, you had to be treated the same.
Britain had just come out of fighting the French and Indian War, which led them to a great deal of debt. This changed their colonial policies greatly. In order for Britain to become stable again, their ideal plan was to raise additional funds from the colonies. This plan would only lead to major issues with the colonists because they were used to low taxes and not much interference from Britain. One of the first of many acts that would take place was the Navigations Act, which started in 1660 and lasted till 1696, which restricted American colonists' trade in several ways. One, only British ships could transport imported and exported goods from the colonies. Two, the only people who were allowed to trade with the colonies had to be British citizens. Three, accommodations such as sugar, tobacco, and cotton wool, which were produced in colonies, could be exported only to British ports. This led to the rise of smuggling. Only a few people were actually paying those taxes needed. Parliament then passed the Sugar Act of 1764. This act called for the tax on foreign sugar. It increased taxes on coffee, indigo, and some wines. It also banned the importation from France of such things such as wines and rums. Before the Sugar Act of 1764, the colonists had a different version, the Sugar and Molasses Act of 1733, which was about to expire. That is why Parliament created the new Sugar Act. The Sugar Act actually lowered the taxes, but now the British were being strict and being more forceful over the tax, and being more aware and stopping smuggling within the colonies. Just a year after is when Parliament came out with the Stamp Act. This caused much more controversy between the mother country and the colonies, because this had nothing to do with trade. The Stamp Act created taxes on printed materials such as playing cards, newspapers, college diplomas, stamps, and more.
People started to take action. They started to refuse to pay the tax that the French government and King Louis XVI was establishing. Also, they created the National Assembly. This was created after the Estates General of 1789 that was made to deal with the economic struggle France was going through. In France, they had three estates. The first estate was the religious leaders. The second estate is composed of the nobles, and the third estate was the peasants. In the Estate General of 1789, the third estate wasn't taken into consideration much. This angered the people, and out of this they created the National Assembly. The National Assembly was composed of the third estate people, and it was more for the common needs of the peasants, because a lot of the peasants were broke and they were going starving. The people were growing angry. They wanted to get rid of the powerful, abusive monarch. The philosophers However, Voltaire influenced the French Revolution by speaking of social reform, meaning the peasants should be taken care of just as much as the nobles were.
This was new for the Americans. They were outraged, causing the first actual uprisings. New leaders came out, such as James Otis, Samuel Adams, and Patrick Henry, fighting for better things. Many people, livid with the new levy, created the biggest violent situation in Boston on August 1760. An angered mob who wrongfully accused Governor Thomas for supporting Stamp Act took his house down. All the drama the Stamp Act created, Parliament decided they could not enforce such a law, so they repealed it. But it did not stop them from their goal in trying to gain much more control in the colonies. After the heated situations from the two countries, it grew worse. Britain kept trying to come out with many more acts and laws to gain control over the colonies, not allowing their rights to self-govern, while the colonists fought back and rebelled. Other incidents occurred, such as the Boston Tea Party, happened after the Townshend Act, which put taxes on teas. Angered colonists, known as the Sons of Liberty, disguised themselves as Indians and climbed into British ships and dumped 342 crates of tea into the harbor on December 16th. This led to similar situations to occur all over the ports in the colonies. Tea was eventually boycotted all throughout the colonies. These acts would cause even greater tension than there already was due to the unfair ruling of the British king. They wanted to govern their own way and become independent. George Washington was the general for the Continental Army. A year after the war had started, the Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence, written by Thomas Jefferson. It stated all men were created equal and all had inalienable rights. This represented that the colonies saw themselves as independent.
The revolution soon burst out. People were now really enraged. It all started with the storming of Bastille on July 14, 1789. This was marked where the rebellion war starts. This revolution also harmed the people, causing more famine and poverty among the people. People wanted to kill King Louis XVI and did on January 21st, 1783. In August 26, 1789, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen was written. This document was very much inspired by the Enlightenment era, as well as the enlightened thinkers such as Rousseau, who wrote about individualism and the general will of the people. This document gave right to the people, but it didn't do much at the moment. Another significant event was the Women's March on Versailles. This occurred on October 5, 1789, where all the women started rioting because of the high prices of bread. The peasants were hungry and all the high prices wasn't helping their situation. They had families to feed. The poverty among the people was so bad that some would go as far as killing a member of their family, which meant one less mouth to feed. Many would argue that if it wasn't for the food shortage and high prices of the food, that the French Revolution wouldn't have begun.
The American Revolution was fought between the 13 original colonies in Britain. The Americans were fighting for their independence they rightfully deserved, which Britain did not want to give to them. The American Revolution began on April 19, 1775, and lasted 8 years. The first major battle was the Battle of Lexington and Concord. There was plenty more battles, but in the end, America won, ending the war with the Treaty of Paris on September 3, 1783, giving them their independence.
Soon the revolution took a whole new turn in 1799. Napoleon Bonaparte is seen as the first consul of France. Not only was France involved in civil war, but as well as it was involved in other wars. France was so out of shape and beaten down. He stopped all the revolution and war going on. However, he was still an emperor, meaning he was an absolute ruler, which was mainly why the French Revolution started. He did make things much better though. He was a good absolute ruler. Things were more equal, which is what people wanted for themselves. Also, as ruling continued, the monarchs were more constitutionalized, which is what they first dreamed of back in 1789 when they first started fighting. The philosopher Montesquieu was the base for this phase of the revolution. He speaks of the separation of the powers. They used this to make base for other governments and monarchies, which was what helped France prosper. Some similarities between the French and the American Revolution were that both were influenced by Enlightenment ideas. They both wanted to get rid of powerful monarchs, and they both wanted the same ideals, like liberty and equality. Both had famous political documents, like the Declaration of Independence for America and the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen for the French. They both had economic crises. Also, they both started mainly because of the taxing rules established on them, and in both cases there were major bloodsheds. Some differences between the American and the French Revolution were that in the American Revolution they wanted to overthrow their king overseas, and in the French it was the peasants in their own country who were revolting. The goals of the American Revolution maintained the same throughout the Revolution, while the ones of the French sort of changed over a period of time. The Americans was against the UK and the French against its own government. French Revolution was inspired by the American Revolution. The French Revolution also had to do a lot with class, the rich versus the poor. The American Revolution was also the first colonies fighting of their own mother country. French got inspired by the success of the Americans' independence.